I want to talk about another issue, and that's the quote, will of the people. So I've knocked a lot of doors, and a frustration from some of the folks I talk to, and I think their motives are sincere, is they feel like what happens is they vote on an initiative petition, and then the state legislature reverses or alters what they voted on. And they're frustrated because they say, well, this is the will of the people, and you guys are messing with, you're trying to subvert the will of the people. And, the answer I have to that is a little bit nuanced. So I am all for the will of the people. Our system of government, all the power in our system of government derives from the people themselves. But the question I have is, the important question is, how is the will of the people expressed? So an analogy I use when I talk to people is I say, well, suppose you're living in this subdivision. Suppose 51% of the people in this subdivision decided they didn't like you, and they decided to run you out of the subdivision, sell off your house, sell off your car, steal your stuff. Would that be okay? Because that's the will of the people if it's 51%, right? Well, obviously that's not okay. It's not in line with our system of government and our laws. And that's because we have laws that protect the rights of the individual. Even if 95% of people decided that they didn't like the idea of freedom of religious worship, it doesn't matter because that's a God-given right. And so it should be protected. The deeper question is, how is that the will of the people expressed? Our founders created a constitutional republic, not a democracy. So they didn't want a situation where you just have a 50% plus one dictating all of our laws. And they called that mobocracy. And so they set up a system where the people vote for representatives, and those representatives then they go and vote on legislation. But they didn't intend to have people voting directly on legislation. They wanted representatives who are dedicated to representing the interest of a particular district to create the laws. And if the people feel like, hey, I'm not being represented fairly by my legislator, then they can vote that person out. In fact, that's why I'm running in this race, because I don't feel like this district's being adequately represented. I don't think our current representative is representing the interests of the people. That's the difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic. The will of the people should be represented. The question is how, and it's through a representative democracy or a constitutional republic, not through a pure democracy where people vote on everything. And the problem, again, is a lot of these initiative petitions are very long, and they're very manipulative. And they're counting on people going in to vote who don't know exactly what's in them. So I would support reforming our initiative petition process. In fact, there will be a ballot initiative going to the people to raise the bar on amending our state constitution. This is an important thing because our state's being hijacked. There are groups who are very aware of this process and are trying to manipulate it to get their agenda rammed down the throats of Missourians. Republican leadership in the House and Senate. Now, I'm not singling out any individual. I know we have some great reps and some great state senators, Republicans in Jefferson City, but for about the last 10 years, Republican leadership has promised to reform our initiative petition process. And every year that's failed. And that had a really dire consequence when Amendment 3 passed, because had we reformed our initiative petition process to raise the bar, Amendment 3 would have never passed because it only had a margin of about 1 or 2%. And now we're having to go through all this effort to reverse Amendment 3 with the new Amendment 3, but we wouldn't have to go through that if if we had reformed our initiative petition process. I would favor, if you get 75% of the counties that individually approve something, then okay, add it to the state constitution. But if you're getting 8 counties out of 114 that are approving something, yet it's becoming state law, I think that's wrong. Our founders created a system of government where, this sounds a little odd to say it, but not everyone's vote counts equally. We like to think everyone's does, but if you look at South Dakota with a population of less than 1 million, they have 2 U.S. senators. California with a population of 40 million has 2 U.S. senators. So an individual in South Dakota has much more representation. Their vote counts more in terms of U.S. senators. Now, the House of Representatives is proportionate to population. So there's those two sides of that. The founders very consciously wanted to give rural states, less populated states, more of a say in our government, as we also see in the Electoral College, because they feared that large cities, megalopolises would dominate and outvote the interests of America. And so they very consciously gave smaller states more of a say. So I have no problem giving more rural counties in Missouri more influence in the way we amend our state constitution. Republican leadership in the House and Senate, if Republican supermajorities failed to properly reform the initiative petition process for the last 10 years, despite promises to do so. And a question arises as to why is that? Was that just, incompetence if it happens 10 years in a row? I don't think so. And the fact is, there are many powerful industries in the state of Missouri that like having an easy initiative petition process, an easy way to pass these ballot measures because they make a lot of money off of things they like to pass. And so there were a lot of moneyed interests that did not want to reform the initiative petition process. And you can bet that they were providing incentive not to reform our system. Education about our system of government. Schools are not teaching civics properly anymore. And you have all these people in our country who believe we have a democracy, and we actually don't. We have a constitutional republic. The founders actually hated pure democracy, although we use democratic principles to elect our representatives. So another issue here is a lack of education about the system of government we have. And it really appalls me that literally like 50 to 60% of our US House reps and senators don't even know what kind of system of government we have, because they constantly talk about democracy or a threat to democracy. Well, we don't have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic. And those folks up in Washington, D.C. should educate themselves as to the actual system of government we have.